Montana. Her parents were Hazel Page Johnson and J. Forrest Johnson. Times were hard on eastern Montana homesteads. When Lauretta was still a toddler, her parents gave up the homestead and moved to the Shields River Valley north of Livingston, Montana, and later into the little town of Livingston, where she grew up. At age 14, she left home to attend Mount Ellis Academy near Bozeman, graduating from high school there as the vice president of the class of 1938. Where were you on December 7, 1941, Pearl Harbor Day? Lauretta would have said she was in the mountains cutting a Christmas tree with a suitor, Frank King. Soon after that, Frank entered the Army, where he spent the next 3.5 years serving his country. Unlike a lot of long-distance relationships which commonly end, Lauretta waited for the love of her life. The sons have some of the love letters that they exchanged while Frank was in the midst of terrible fighting on Guadalcanal, Bougainville, and the Philippines. When Frank returned home at war's end, they married on her 26th birthday, April 14, 1946. Frank and Lauretta spent the rest of their lives together and raised 4 sons. Ray, born in 1948, Alan, born in 1950, Art, born in 1956, and Larry, born in 1958, all in Bozeman. After Lauretta graduated from Mount Ellis Academy in 1938, she attended Walla Walla College for 2 or 3 years. She interrupted her studies to accept a request from the Montana Conference of Seventh-day Adventists to work as the accountant on a temporary basis before resuming college. The temporary job lasted nearly 40 years. She trained and tutored numerous conference presidents and treasurers along the way. People she worked with at the office became her lifelong friends, including Marge Carpenter Nelson, John and Ruby Griffin, the Bevan family, the McIver family, Warren and Becky Dick, Greg and Jean Davis, Dwayne House, and Bert Pooley. Loretta's association with Mount Ellis Academy lasted even longer. From entering the academy in the fall of 1934 until moving to College Place in 2011, she spent her life with some involvement at the academy. In the 1950s and 60s, she occasionally taught typing and shorthand classes, and she worked in the business office. She and Frank were class sponsors of several classes. However, her presence and involvement extended far beyond those roles. She knew students who were great-grandchildren of students in earlier years. Hundreds of former students knew her and remember her cheerful and youthful spirit and her kindness. The legacy that Frank and Lauretta have left from their time of unselfish service is best summed up in the lives of all who have been fortunate enough to have been touched by Lauretta and Frank's love and generosity. Everyone needs a home away from home. Dave Gordon, Terry Rowe, Joe Juarez, Carrie Kyle, Karen Hustwaite, or just a few of those youngsters who made their second home with Frank and Lauretta. Mount Ellis staff members were her community, and she served as mentor and confidant for many. Lowell and Arladell Nelson, Wes and Jackie Parker, Clyde and Winnie Smith, the Tafts, the Bergers, the Robinsons, the Russells, the Crandalls, Kathy Hickson, and the Lewis family are just a few of those great friends. Lauretta remained active throughout her long life. In her 70s and 80s, she and Lenora Nelson provided Meals on Wheels to seniors and disabled who were much younger than herself. She loved to ice skate and was really good at that, especially with her graceful partner, Frank. She once tried snow skiing, didn't like it, and pronounced that was the first and last time. She was a skilled ping pong player, often surprising her kids and grandkids with her victories. Lauretta became a world traveler, visiting her children in Norway, Guam, Australia, and New Zealand. In 2011, Lauretta and Frank moved to Walla Walla to be near children and grandchildren. Lauretta is survived by Frank King, her husband of 68 years, by her 4 sons and their wives, Ray and April King of Bend, Oregon, Alan King of Indonesia, Art and Rhonda King of College Place, Washington, and Larry and Debbie of Bozeman. Also by 19 grandchildren and 13 great-grandchildren. Loretta's very wide circle of dear friends testifies to her lifelong love and care for everyone within her circle of influence. Though it is hard for us to say goodbye, Frank and her family and friends are proud and grateful to have been part of this wonderful woman's life. We love you, Lauretta.
My dad's mother, Pearl Page Buck, was a sister to Loretta's mother, Hazel Page Johnson. So my dad and Lauretta were cousins, just about 3 months apart in age. So when I moved to Bozeman from, where did I move from? Portland. In 1979, she was, Frank and Lauretta were among the first people that I got to know. I had met them a few times over my life, but I really got to know how wonderful they were when I moved here. So I have a couple of tributes to read. One is by Warren Dick. Warren was the Montana Conference treasurer from 1965 to 1974, and Lauretta worked with him during that time. And he wrote a really cute little poem. Lauretta King taught me all I needed to know about treasury in a conference buried in snow. I got credit for a lot of the work she did, because in the background is where she hid. Her 4 boys, growing up as the love of her life, occupied her time, plus always being a good wife. Her face throughout Montana was not well known, but her name and reputation were never outgrown. Her husband Frank and her 4 boys, all famous in their own fields, but remembering their house, where Mom was behind the scene, but her influence felt. Though maybe cold and snowy outside, inside it did melt. When I arrived on the scene as the treasurer-to-be, her remark was, finally, a treasurer who is younger than me. Her name and long life are well known in the big sky. Her character speaks for itself is the reason why. Words don't come to me to pay the overdue praise to a wonderful lady with Christ-like displays. And Harold and Janelle Dixon, most of you probably are aware who they are. They worked at Mount Ellis Academy for many years, and then Harold became assistant treasurer at the Montana Conference, and then as part of that job, he was my predecessor in the business office here. So he writes, they write, Dear Debbie, we wanted to send a loving greeting to all of you who will be there for the special Frank and Lauretta weekend. How saddened we were to hear of her passing. What a precious and gracious lady, so loved by all of us who knew her. She was really First Lady of Mount Ellis Academy for all the years we remember. Frank was Mr. Mount Ellis and did everything from keeping the mechanics of the school working, the farm, driving bus for tours in the early days, and making sure that everyone had fun, like making ice skating rinks. They were like parents to us when we arrived so far from home. Frank taught me to ice skate, and Lauretta gave me a wonderful tip I still use when making granola. Through the years, their guiding lights never dimmed, and it was wonderful to have the residence hall named for them. The last few years, when we would visit them in Walla Walla, they were just as precious as ever. Just know that our thoughts and prayers are with all of you. Lovingly, Janelle and Harold Dixon.
I'm going to try to read a poem. This was written by our son-in-law, Dan. Dan and Kelly are still in Korea. Thank goodness for Skype. It's wonderful. They were in Thailand, and they are a 2-elephant family. Because it took 1 elephant with Kelly and 2 kids, and it took another elephant with Dan and one of their kids and one of the neighbor kids that they brought to Thailand with them. So they said, we're a 2-elephant family. The first time I met Lauretta, it was just as Alan's mother. She was always good for cookies or some snack or another. And she was quite a lady too, with 5 guys to keep in line. She always seemed to do the job. Things turned out mighty fine. And then I got to know her as the wife of Farmer Frank, my boss at the academy. There's much for him I thank. I learned that she was good for meals, and as a sponsor too. And things when we couldn't get it done, she could push it through. Lauretta gave such good advice and words of comfort too. I soon came to realize there was little she couldn't do. Somehow I knew she had a job that helped define her too. But to me, that wasn't who she was, just what she had to do. And then I married Kelly. Lauretta entered a new role, for now she was my grandma too, a position I extol. And having her for grandma, I thought nothing could be neater. Now this line doesn't add much, but it keeps the rhyme in meter. When Greta and the twins arrived, I found there was another role that Lauretta excelled at, that of great-grandmother. But in spite of all the roles she played, I learned that in the end, the best position that she filled was being a dear friend. And then my brother Ray, who is way older than me, much older. As the oldest of Loretta's 4 children, I had perhaps a slightly different perspective than my brothers. After all, she got to try things out on me. In retrospect, one thing that impressed me is that she never seemed to panic or lose her cool when the situation demanded it. Like when one of my brothers was bitten in the face by a dog, or a bandaged head, broken bones, surgeries, and other accidents, injuries, and crises, inevitably for 4 sons. When I was working hard to be a bad example to my younger brothers, she made clear her expectations. She never became fanatical or lapsed into anger or frustration. I wished I could say as much for my own interactions with my children. Memories of my mother bring me a great range of emotion. Thankfulness for her long and rewarding life, humility by the extent of her guidance and influence, regret for things I didn't say or do, happiness that she got to know my children and grandchildren, and relief that she didn't linger and suffer. I'll miss her, but I will always be thankful for the 66 years we shared and for the memories.